Today I'll be reading a book, Fahrenheit 451, by Ray Bradbury. I bought this book at Barnes & Nobles a few weeks ago. The book is dedicated to Don. I can't say his last name, but it's dedicated to Don. If they give you ruled paper, write it the other way. Juan Ramon. Chapter 1. The Hearth and the Salamander. It was a pleasure to burn. It was a special pleasure to see things eaten, to see things blackened and changed. With the brass nozzle in his fist, with this great python spitting its venomous kerosene upon the world, the blood pounded in his head, and his hands were the hands of some amazing conductor playing all the symphonies of blazing and burning to bring down the tatters and charcoal ruins of history. With a symbolic helmet numbered 451 on his stolid head, and his eyes all orange flames with the thought of what came next, he flickered the igniter, and the house jumped up in a gorging fire that burned the evening sky red and yellow and black. He strode in a swarm of fireflies. He wanted, above all, like the old joke, to shove a marshmallow on a stick in the furnace, while the flapping pigeon-wing books died on the porch and the lawn of the house, while the books went up in sparkling whirls and blew away on a wind turned dark with burning. Montag grinned the fierce grin of all men. Seemed and driven back by flame. He knew that when he returned to the firehouse, he might wink at himself, a minstrel man, burnt corked, in the mirror. Later, going to sleep, he would feel the fiery smile still gripped by his face muscles in the dark. It never went away, that smile. It never went away, as long as he remembered. He hung up his black beetle-covered helmet and shined it. He hung his flame-proof jacket neatly. He showered luxuriously, and then, whistling, hands in pocket, walked across the upper floor of the fire station and fell down the hole. At the last moment, when disaster seemed positive, he pulled his hands from his pocket and broke his fall by grasping the golden pole. He slid to a squeaking halt, the heels 1 inch from the concrete floor downstairs. He walked out of the fire station along the midnight street towards the subway, where the silent air-propelled train slid soundlessly down its lubricated flue and the earth and let him out with a great puff of warm air onto the cream-tiled escalator rising to the suburb. Whistling, he let the escalator waft him into the still night air. He walked towards the corner, thinking little at all about nothing in particular. Before he reached the corner, however, he slowed as if a wind had sprung up from nowhere, as if someone had called his name. The last few nights, he had the most uncertain feelings about the sidewalk. Just around the corner here, moving in the starlit towards his house, he had felt that moment prior to his making the turn someone had been there. The air seemed charged with a special calm, as if someone had waited there quietly, and only a moment before he came, simply turned to a shadow and let him through. Perhaps his nose detected a faint perfume. Perhaps the skin on the back of his hands, on his face, felt the temperature rise at this one spot where a person standing might raise the immediate atmosphere 10 degrees for an instant. There was no understanding it. Each time he made the turn, he saw only the white, unused, buckling sidewalk, with perhaps one night something vanishing swiftly across the lawn before he could focus his eyes or speak. But now tonight he slowed almost to a stop, his inner mind reaching out to turn the corner for him. He heard the faintest whisper. Breathing? Or was the atmosphere compressed merely by someone standing very quietly there waiting? He turned the corner. The autumn leaves blew over the moonlit pavement in such a way to make the girl who was moving there seem fixed to the sliding walk, letting the motion of the wind and the leaves carry her forward. Her head was half bent to watch her shoes stare at the circling leaves. Her face was slender and milk white, and in it was a gentle kind of hunger that touched almost everything with tireless curiosity. It was looked almost of pale surprise. The dark eyes were so fixed to the world that no one moved, no one escaped them. Her dress was white and it whispered. He almost thought he heard the motion of her hands as she walked, and the infinitely small sound now, the white stir of her face turning when she discovered she was a moment away from a man who stood in the middle of the pavement, waiting for her. The trees overhead made a great sound of letting down their dry rain. The girl stopped and looked as if she might pull back in surprise, but instead stood regarding Montag with eyes so dark and shining and alive that he felt that he said something quite wonderful, but he knew his mouth had only moved to say hello. And then she seemed hypnotized by the salamander on his arm and the phoenix disc on his chest. He spoke again. Of course, he said, you're our new neighbor, aren't you? And you must be, she raised her eyes from his professional symbols. The fireman, her voice trailed off. How oddly you say that. I have known it with my eyes shut, she said slowly. What? The smell of kerosene. My wife always complains, he laughed. You never wash it off completely. No, you don't, she said in awe. He felt she was walking in a circle around him, turning him end for end, shaking him quietly and emptying his pockets without once moving herself. Kerosene, he said, because the silence had lengthened, is nothing but perfume to me. Does it seem like that, really? Of course, why not? She gave herself time to think of it. I don't know. She turned her face to the sidewalk, going towards their homes. Do you mind if I walk back with you? I'm Clarice McLennan. Clarice? Guy Montag. Come along. What are you doing out so late wandering around? How old are you? They walked in the warm, cool, glowing night on the silvered pavement, and there was the faintest breath of a fresh apricots and strawberries in the air. And he looked around and realized this was quite impossible so late in the year. There was only the girl walking with him now, her face bright as snow in the moonlight, and he knew she was working his questions around, seeking the best answers she could possibly give. Well, she said, I'm 17 and I'm crazy. My uncle says the two always go together. When people ask your age, he said, always say 17 and insane. Isn't that a nice time of night to walk? Isn't this a nice time of night to walk? I like to smell things and look at things and sometimes stay up all night walking and watch the sunrise. They walked on again in silence, and finally she said thoughtfully, You know, I'm not afraid of you at all. He was surprised. Why should you be? So many people are afraid of firemen. I mean, but you're just a man after all. He saw himself in her eyes suspended in two shining drops of bright water, himself dark and tiny in fine details, the line about his every mouth, everything there, and if her eyes were two miraculous bites of violet amber that might capture and hold him intact. Her face, turned to him now, was fragile milk crystal with a soft and constant light in it. It was not the hysterical light of electricity, but what? But the strangely comfortable and rare and gently flattering light of the candle. One time as a child in a power failure, his mother had found it and lit the last candle, and there had been a brief hour of rediscovery, of such illumination that space lost its vast dimensions and drew comfortably around them, and they, mother and son, alone transformed, hoping that the power might not come on again too soon. And then Clarissa McLennan said, "Do you mind if I ask how long you've been working as a fireman?" "Since I was 20, 10 years ago." "Do you ever read any of the books you burn?" He laughed. "That's against the law." "Oh, of course." Hold on a minute. This book is really long, and this chapter is pretty long, so I'm going to end it off here at the 10-minute mark. I hope you enjoyed listening, and I hope to continue reading this book with you. Have a good day.